Some men are born to live, a few are born to lead, but once in 1,000 years, one is born to conquer the world. That one was Alexander. He wasn't just a king, he wasn't just a warrior. He was a storm wearing a crown, a vision walking on 2 feet, a fire that refused to burn out until the whole world knew his name. He was born in 356 BC in the ancient kingdom of Macedonia, the son of King Philip II and Queen Olympias. But Alexander wasn't just royalty. His mother raised him to believe he was divine, a descendant of gods. And he believed it, deeply, truly, completely. From the beginning, Alexander was different, restless, fierce, insatiable. While other boys played with wooden swords, he studied legends. He read Homer's Iliad and saw himself in Achilles, a hero not satisfied with just winning battles, but with becoming immortal through glory. And his education wasn't ordinary. His tutor was Aristotle, the greatest philosopher of the ancient world. He taught Alexander not just philosophy and science, but how to think like a ruler, how to question everything, how to lead men not only by fear, but by brilliance. By the age of 16, Alexander had already led armies. By 18, he proved himself in battle. And when his father was assassinated, Alexander became king at just 20 years old. Most rulers at that age would struggle just to keep the throne. But Alexander, he wasn't here to keep kingdoms, he came to take them. He crushed rebellions in Greece with precision, uniting the city-states under his command. But his eyes were never on Greece. His true obsession was Persia, the largest, richest, most powerful empire the world had ever seen. Others feared it. Alexander desired it, not for gold, not for land, but for legacy. He believed he was born to defeat the Persians, to finish what his father had started, to rewrite history with his own name on every page. With an army of just 40,000, he crossed into Asia Minor, against an empire with numbers 5 times his own. His first major test came at the river Granicus. Persian satraps waited for him, confident they would crush the young Macedonian. But Alexander charged first, head-on into enemy lines, spear in hand, heart on fire. His men followed, not because they were ordered, but because they believed. And they won. Persia's elite lay dead in the mud, and Alexander stood victorious. That was only the beginning. Next came the Battle of Issus, a turning point in history. The Persian king, Darius III himself, led an army twice the size of Alexander's, but numbers meant nothing to a man with vision. Alexander studied the land, used tight terrain to trap his enemies, and then, like a blade from the dark, he struck directly at Darius. The mighty king panicked and fled, leaving behind his gold, his weapons, even his own family. Alexander took it all, but he didn't touch the royal women, didn't harm a soul. He treated Darius's wife and daughters with respect, with honor. Because to Alexander, power didn't mean cruelty, it meant control. It meant dominance with discipline. He wasn't just beating his enemies, he was bending history around his will. After Issus, the doors of the ancient world flew open. Cities surrendered, crowds cheered, and Alexander kept moving, tirelessly, fearlessly, each step deeper into Asia, further from home, closer to destiny. In Egypt, they called him a liberator, a savior. They crowned him pharaoh, called him the son of Amun, a living god. And there in the desert, he founded the city of Alexandria, a city that would one day shine as a beacon of knowledge and power for centuries. But Alexander didn't pause. He couldn't. Something inside him burned, a voice, maybe divine, whispering, "More. Keep going. The world isn't yours yet." And so, he marched east. Alexander was no longer just a Macedonian king. He was a force sweeping through continents, a myth come to life. But with each victory, the stakes got higher, the resistance got fiercer, and the road got darker. His next target was Tyre, a proud, rich island fortress off the coast of Phoenicia. No army had ever taken it. It was considered untouchable, protected by the sea. But Alexander didn't believe in the word impossible. He ordered his men to build a causeway, stone by stone, into the ocean, a road of war stretching toward the island. It took 7 brutal months. His men fought waves, arrows, disease, exhaustion, but they didn't stop, because they weren't just building a path to Tyre. They were building Alexander's legend. When the causeway reached the walls, the siege engines roared, the city fell, and the world gasped. If Tyre could fall, no one was safe. But Alexander wasn't done. In Gaza, he met another wall of resistance. The defenders laughed at his ambition, mocked his youth. But he took the city, hard, fast, and mercilessly. And as the dust settled, people finally began to understand this man didn't just win wars. He changed the rules of war. He wasn't fighting for land, he was fighting for destiny. Then came Babylon, the jewel of the East, a city of wonders, temples, and towering walls. But Alexander didn't need to fight this time. Babylon opened its gates to him. Its people welcomed him as a god-king, and he walked through the gates not as an invader, but as a legend already written. But the one enemy still standing was Darius. The Persian king had regrouped. At Gaugamela, he gathered the might of the empire. Hundreds of thousands, chariots with blades, war elephants, the greatest force the East had ever seen. But Alexander saw only opportunity. He studied every inch of the battlefield, positioned his cavalry like a chess master, and when the moment came, he struck with surgical precision, straight at Darius. Chaos erupted, fear spread, and once again, the King of Kings ran. Darius fled into the mountains, betrayed by his own generals and eventually murdered by his own men. Alexander found his corpse. He didn't celebrate. He didn't smile. He wept. Because he hadn't wanted Darius dead. He wanted him defeated, broken, to see with his own eyes the rise of a new order. But now, Alexander stood alone, king of Persia, ruler of the known world, yet the fire inside him still burned. He didn't stop. He couldn't. He pushed east, deeper into unknown lands. He crossed the mighty Hindu Kush mountains, led his army through freezing heights and starving valleys. They reached Bactria, then Sogdiana, regions fierce with rebellion. Alexander crushed resistance with ruthless brilliance, not just with swords but with strategy. He married Roxana, a local princess, a move that turned enemies into allies. He began adopting Persian dress, customs, even divine titles. His men whispered. Some were uneasy. He wasn't the same man who left Macedonia, but Alexander had changed, not by weakness, but by vision. He wasn't building a Greek empire. He was forging something bigger, a fusion of East and West, a new world under one ruler, one king, one name. Still, not all were convinced. His closest friend Clytus spoke out, accusing him of arrogance, of abandoning his roots. They argued, voices rose, in a fit of rage. Alexander killed him, with his own hand. Silence followed, and guilt. For days he refused to eat. He shut himself away, haunted by the weight of what he had done. This wasn't just a death, it was a fracture in his soul. But leaders don't get to mourn for long. He pressed forward, toward India. There he faced a new enemy, King Porus, a giant of a man, brave, proud. His army brought something Alexander's had never seen, war elephants, monsters of battle, thundering across the field. The Battle of the Hydaspes was unlike any before. Rain poured, mud sucked at their feet, the elephants charged, horses panicked. But Alexander held the line. He adapted, he split the enemy's forces, and in the heart of chaos he found victory. But it came at a cost. His men were tired, bleeding. They had marched for years, seen friends die, suffered every hardship. And now, they refused to go further. They wanted to go home. Alexander stood before them, fire still in his eyes, but something broke in him. He agreed. They turned back. But the road home was even more deadly. They turned back, but it wasn't a return in glory. It was a march through hell. The Gedrosian desert was death stretched for miles, heat beyond imagination, no water, no shelter. sandstorms that swallowed men whole. Alexander, once a god on the battlefield, now marched beside his dying soldiers, refusing to ride, refusing shade. He suffered with them, he bled with them, because to him he wasn't just their king, he was their brother in war. But even he couldn't stop the desert. Thousands died, entire units vanished in the wind. And yet somehow, Alexander emerged from the sand, scarred, but not broken. When they finally reached Babylon, it wasn't a homecoming, it was the beginning of the end. Alexander began planning something unthinkable, a new world order. He wanted to merge East and West completely. He married again, encouraged his generals to marry Persian women. He created a unified army, Macedonians, Persians, Indians, Egyptians, all trained under one banner. He spoke of expansion, of pushing west to Arabia, maybe even further. But whispers followed him now. His men were divided. Some feared he was no longer the man they followed out of Greece, but something else, something not entirely human. Then it happened. One night, after a long banquet, Alexander fell ill. A fever gripped him. His strength, the same strength that had carried him across continents, began to slip away. Days passed, he couldn't speak. His generals stood around him helpless, praying, crying, watching a titan fade. They asked him, "To whom do you leave your empire?" Alexander, with his last breath, whispered, "To the strongest." And just like that, he was gone. At just 32 years old, the man who had conquered the known world died. The news rippled across continents. Cities mourned, soldiers wept like children. Enemies lit candles in his honor. No one could believe it. How could the unstoppable stop? How could a man who walked like a god, who changed maps with his hand, who bent empires to his will, simply vanish? His body was placed in a golden sarcophagus, taken to Alexandria, the city he founded, the jewel he left behind. But his empire? That didn't survive him. His generals, once united by loyalty, tore it apart. The land was divided. Brothers turned on brothers, and the dream of one world under one king shattered like glass. But Alexander's story didn't end there, because legends don't need empires, they need memory. And Alexander was remembered, not just as a warrior but as an idea, a symbol, a force. Napoleon studied him. Caesar wept at his grave. Great men throughout history measured themselves against him, and none, not one, ever truly matched him. Because Alexander wasn't just great for the land he took. He was great for the way he took it. He led from the front. He bled in every battle. He learned from every culture. He dared to blend worlds that hated each other, and for a moment made them one. He wasn't perfect. He was impulsive, proud, even ruthless, but he dreamed bigger than anyone had dared before him. And more than that, he chased those dreams to the edge of the earth. In just 12 years, he built an empire that stretched from Greece to India. No GPS, no modern tech, just willpower, strategy, and a hunger that no crown could satisfy. He wasn't chasing gold. He wasn't chasing peace. He was chasing immortality. And he found it. Because today, 2,300 years later, we still speak his name. Not in fear, but in awe. Not because of how he died, but because of how he lived. So when you feel small, when the world tells you it's impossible, when the mountain looks too high, the enemy,